Begin today the Gemara on the last two words on the Tes Samad Beis. The Gemara here is discussing what it said in the Mishnah when a person uses a terminology in a neder, which is just a yad. He doesn't spell out fully the neder. So the Mishnah said that when a person says "Nidrei kshedim," that I want to make a neder like the neder of those kosher Yidden that make a neder, it doesn't take effect because kosher Yidden don't make a neder. It's not a good thing to make a neder. But if you say kenidvas kshedim, like the kshedim that donate with goodwill to make a neder, or it's really a nedava, not a neder, that will take effect. It's a nedava. And the Gemara brought that there's a machlokes between Rab Meir and Rab Yehuda based on the pasuk that says toiva shaloi tidar. It's better a person should not make a neder. And there was a machlokes between Rab Yehuda and Rab Meir whether it's better for a person not to make a neder at all, or it's better for a person to make a neder and fulfill his neder. And the Gemara said in the first pshat that our Mishnah goes according to Rab Meir, even though Rab Meir says that it's better for a person not to make a neder, but nevertheless that's only a neder. But a nedava, even Rab Meir agrees that it comes from goodwill. We're not concerned that he's not going to fulfill it, so it's good for a person to make a nedava. Now the Gemara continues here on the same subject, and here the Gemara will say that our Mishnah actually goes like Rab Yehuda. Very similar, but it's just Rab Yehuda again. Rab Yehuda is the one that said that it's better for a person to be neider or mishalem, which means even Yidden that are ksherim do make nedarim. But right now the Gemara is going to say that our Mishnah actually goes like Rab Yehuda. Let's see the lashon of the Gemara. Nedava means a donation. So at the last two words on the bottom of the Tes Samad Beis. Or we could say, who does our Mishnah go according to? On the top of Yudam and Aleph, Afilatei Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Ki Omer Rabbi Yehuda, when the Gemara brought before that Rabbi Yehuda said that a person should make a neder and fulfill it, he didn't mean a neder actually. Benedava. He only meant a nedava. Beneder lo yama. But if it's a neder, then he didn't say that it's a good idea for a person to make a neder. If it's not coming from goodwill, and it's something that whatever situation a person is spontaneously or forced into making a neder, but it's not coming as a nedava, a person should not make a neder. Frek Gemara, but v'ha ketani. But the Braisa we quoted before, what did Rabbi Yehuda there say? He said, Toiv, mizeh o mizeh, neider o mekayim. He used the expression of neider, that it's better than all is a person that makes a neder and fulfills his neder. And says the Gemara, according to this pshat, Tani neider o mekayim. We have to say, change the word in the Braisa, he meant to say neider o mekayim. Only a person that makes an adava, a donation with goodwill, that's the best of all. Which basically means that Rabbi Yehuda really interprets the psukim there the same like Rab Meir. Rab Meir said in the lashon of the pasuk, and it says Toiv ashaloi tidar, that's the best. If you're talking about a neder in the lashon of the pasuk, the best is not to make any neder. But what he argues on Rab Meir is, Rab Meir says just like you don't make a neder, don't make a nedav either. Even if you think it's coming with goodwill, doesn't make a difference. We're still worried a person won't fulfill it. Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you have to be medayik in the words of the pasuk. Pasuk said toiva shaloi tidar, only a neder. But if it's something which comes with goodwill, so then we can rely on that the person will fulfill it, as the Gemara will explain here now. And here, this Gemara is going to be very similar to what we learned yesterday on Daf Tes. Frek the Gemara, Maishna neider deloi. What's the difference? If a person makes a neder, so you say that it's not a good idea, dilma sibalidei takala. So you might come and stumble and not fulfill the neder you made. Nedava nami dilma sibalidei takala. By a nedava as well, a person might stumble and not fulfill the nedava. Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei. Rabbi Yehuda follows his reasoning. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, and yesterday we had a similar thing quoted in the name of Hillel HaZakin, but here, because we're speaking about Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, it brings it from Rabbi Yehuda himself. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, Adam mevi kivsase la'azara, a person, he's bringing a carbon, so let him bring his lamb, his keves, to the azara. Umakdisha, and over there, right near the azara, that's where you makdish it. Don't be makdish it earlier on, because then it can be misused and so on, but be makdish it right then, and v'saymech aleh, and there you'll do the smicha, and v'shaychta, and immediately the shechta carbon, and so therefore if you wait until then, you don't have to be worried that maybe you won't fulfill your neder, or your nedava, or maybe something else will happen to it, me'ilah, because you wait with the nedava until you come to the azara. That's what the pasuk is speaking about. That's what Rabbi Yehuda was speaking about when he said that it's okay to make a nedava. Frek the Gemara, Teinach Nedava, the Karbanis. So that explains how you make a nedava by karbanis, and we're not concerned that he's not going to fulfill it. Nedava the nizirus my ikula meima. Regarding nizirus, why is there any difference between a nedava of nizirus or a neder of nizirus? Either way, it's the same nizirus. Why, if he makes it as a nedava with goodwill, why is that any different? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei. Rabbi Yehuda follows his reasoning. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braise, that Rabbi Yehuda says that in certain situations it's a good thing for a person to be a nazir. As Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Yehuda ayma chsidim arishainim. The earlier chsidim, hayu misavin lahavi karban chatas. They had a taiva, they had a desire to bring a karban chatas. Like all other karbanis they wanted to bring, a karban chatas as well is a mitzvah, and it's a kind of a carbon that they wanted to bring. The fee she'ena kadosh baruch hu maybe takala al yedayim, and the reason why this stayed as a taiva, they only had a desire, but they didn't actually have the ability to bring it, is because even though karban chatas is only brought for a shaygig, but tzaddikim, the Eibusha doesn't bring any takala through tzaddikim. They're not even over on an aveda b'shaygig. So how is he ever going to be able to bring a karban chatas? So ma'ayos, and what would they do to give themselves the ability to bring a karban chatas? Oimdin umisnadvin niziris l'mokem. They would get up and they would make a nedave to be a nazir. Kidei she is chayiv karban chatas l'mokim. So then one of the karbanis of a nazir is that he has to bring a karban chatas. So the whole idea, the whole reason why they became a nazir is out of their great desire to fulfill this mitzvah of bringing a karban chatas. So we see over here, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that this is the conduct of chasidim arishainim. So this kind of a nazir, which is coming from such a desire to do the Eibishter's ratzon, to bring this carbon, we're not concerned that he's not going to fulfill his naziris, and therefore this nedava is good. Rab Shimon disagrees with this. Rab Shimon says, Lo nadru ben nazir. They did not make a neder to become a nazir. Ella, rather, haraitza lahavi ayla misnadev. If a person has a desire to bring a carbon ayla, so that you could donate to bring an ayla. Umevi, and you bring it shlamim misnadav umevi. If you want to bring a shlamim, you could also donate and bring taida v'arba mini lachmim lachma. If you want to bring a carbon taida, which includes the 4 different types of breads that come with it, misnadav umevi. That's also something you can donate and bring. Avol benizirus layisnadvu. But this, in order to bring a chatas, to become a nazir and then bring a chatas, they would not donate in such a way. Why? Kidei shelo yikru chaitim, because they don't want to be called as sinners. Shenema, the pasuk says regarding the carbon chatas that a nazir brings, v'chiper olav mi'ashachata ala nefesh, that the carbon comes to atone for the person that sinned. So it's a chet. Even just to be a nazir is a chet. So therefore they did not donate to become a nazir. The Gemara here will now explain what this taka means. Why is a person that donates he makes a neder to be a nazir just for this purpose, because he wants to bring the carbon chatas? Why is being a nazir an aveda? Amar Abaye says Shimon at Tzaddik, which we quoted earlier on Daf Tes, Verab Shimon, and which we just quoted now, and Verab Lazar Kappa, which the Gemara is going to quote right here. Kulon shita achasein. They all have one opinion, which is the nazir chaytav. A person that's a nazir is a sinner. Shimon at Tzaddik, Rab Shimon hodamaran. Shimon at Tzaddik and Rab Shimon is what we mentioned before. Now the truth is, what Shimon at Tzaddik said and what Rab Shimon said right over here is not exactly the same, because if you remember, Shimon at Tzaddik said regarding a person, he was speaking there in the Braise regarding a person that was a nazir and then he became tomei during his naziris, and he brings a carbon, so he didn't want to eat from his carbon, because Shimon HaTzadik said this person that made the neder to be a nazir thought it's going to last 30 days or whatever amount of time he accepted upon himself, and then he becomes tamei, and all of a sudden he has to start over his naziris again. So only after he becomes tamei, he becomes frustrated that it's lasting longer than he wanted, so then he's called a chayta. That's Shimon HaTzadik. But from Rab Shimon we see over here that every nazir is called a chayta even if he doesn't become tamei. And Rabbi Lazar HaKaper Berebi, Rabbi Lazar HaKaper said in the name of Rebbe, the Tanya, Rabbi Lazar HaKaper Berebi Omer, or Berebi is actually a term regarding him, that he's called Berebi. He was a great person, so he said, V'chiper olav ma'ashachata ala nefesh. The pasuk says that he needs a kapara. He sinned when he became a nazir. So the question is, V'chi be'ezen nefesh chata zeh? What aspect of his nefesh, in what way did he sin when he makes himself a nazir? Ella, the answer is shetzir atzmai min hayayin, because he pained himself by separating, not to drink wine. That's an aveda. And then from this he learns v'haloi dvarim kal v'chaymer. From here we could learn out of kal v'chaymer. Umazeh sheloi tzir atzmai ela min hayayin. a person that's a nazir. So the only thing he has to abstain from, as when it comes to as far as eating and drinking is concerned, it's wine or grapes. So, and he's called a chayte, nikra chayte. Just this, hamitzayir atzmai mikol davar, a person that makes a broader neder, that he's not going to eat bread, or he's going to fast. Alachas kama v'kama, most definitely it's not what the Torah wants, and most definitely he's called a chayte. Mikan, from here I learn, kol hayeshiv b'taines nikra chayte. A person that fasts is called a chayte. The Alter Rebbe quotes this concept in Tanya in the Negeres HaTshuva, when the Alter Rebbe talks about the idea that even though you look in different places in Gemara, it speaks about the amount of fasts that a person should fast for tshuva, and especially in Kisvei Arizal, it speaks about huge numbers of fasts that a person should be fasting for tshuva. But nevertheless, we see over here in the Gemara that a person that fasts is called a chayte. Why is a person that fasts called a chayte? So there's two reasons. Number one, the reason is because if the Eibishter created all these things in the world, what did he create it for? That Goyim should eat and drink, that a Yid should eat and drink, in a Yontif, and even on a regular day, to use the energy of all this food and good geschmack things in the world to serve Hashem. It has to be elevated, all the holy sparks that exist in everything in the world. Another reason, which the Alter Rebbe also discusses there in Negeres HaTshuva, is that when a person fasts, so then it takes away from his energy to be able to learn Torah and daven and serve Hashem properly. So a person that becomes shvach by not fasting, so on one hand, he's abstaining from the gashmias and from the materialism of the world, but at the same time, it's weakening his avodas Hashem. Or sometimes it could even get to the point, like the famous word of the Mezritcher Maggid, that a kleine loch in the guf is a kleine lechele in the guf is a greise loch in the neshama. If you have just a small puncture, a little hole in the body where it's not fully strong and well, it creates a huge hole in the power of a yid to serve the Eibishter. So therefore, a person that's sinning, and a person that's fasting and doesn't have the ability to serve Hashem properly is called a chayte. Okay, but obviously, as we see that there are certain people that have the ability to be a nazir and to yet at the same time serve the Eibishter properly. The Torah gives the mitzvah of naziris for certain situations. But generally, a person that's a nazir is called a chayte. And now the Gemara asks from the pasuk that we brought before, that's the source for this. So the Gemara brought the pasuk v'chiper olav mashachata ala nefesh. Frek the Gemara v'aden kra b'nazir tamiksiv. If you look in the simple pshat of the pasuk, that's not speaking about every single nazir. That pasuk is speaking about a person that became a nazir and then became tamei, and now he brings his karbonis when he became tamei. That person that became tamei, he's called a chayte, not every nazir. That says the Gemara, Mishum Deshana Bechetu. In fact, the person that became Tameh after he became a Nazir, he is already repeating his sin. Not only did he become a Nazir, which is a sin in the first place, but also now that he became Tameh while he was a Nazir, is yet a second Aveda. And where we see this in the pasuk. So the Ran over here says, because there's an extra word. These words Al Hanefesh are extra words. If the pasuk would just simply say that V'chiper olav me'ashachata, we would know what it means. Why does it have to add the extra words of Al Hanefesh? That teaches me that not only the chet that happened now, that he became tamei, is a chet, but the fact that he became a nazir in the first place, that he accepted it upon himself. Ala nefesh means he accepted upon himself to be a nazir. That itself is the chet. So therefore we have a double chet over here. Okay, let's continue. Going back now to the beginning of the Masechta. What's the name of this Peirik? The name of this Peirik is Kol Kinuye, right? The various different nicknames or substitutes that a person could use in the language when he wants to make himself a neder or a nazir, and so on. So it's Mishnah said that Kol Kinuye Nedarim ki Nedarim. So here's the Mishnah where it gives you the examples of what it is. What are these nicknames for the terminology of a neder? A person says kainem, kainech, kainis. These three words of kainem, kainech, and kainis. In other words, he says that harei zeh kainech or harei alai kainech, meaning that instead of using the term carbon, he says that this object should be like a carbon, usher like a carbon. And so he doesn't say carbon, but he says this object should be for me like a kainem. Harei elu kinuyim lekarbon. These are three terminologies that are substitutes for the word carbon. Cheirek, cheirech, cheiref. These three words, these are substitutes for the word cheirem. The word cheirem is taken from the Torah, which means that you're ostracizing or you're separating something, that it should be like a carbon. The word cheirem is used in the Torah when something is given for the Beis HaMikdash and it becomes asa to be used. So cheirem therefore is a terminology used for a neder. So these three words are the substitute for cheirem. And now by Nazirus, Nazik, Naziach, Paziach, these are substitutes for the words that a person uses when he wants to be a nazir. Shvusa, shkuka, these two words of shvusa and shkuka, And also, neder b'moihi, person that says, I make a neder b'moihi. B'moihi is a nickname for Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is a third nickname, a third substitute for a shvua. Why? Because in the Torah we find that Moshe Rabbeinu made a shvua. It says in Parshas Shmos, Vayoyel Moshe l'Sheves, that Moshe Rabbeinu swore that he's going to stay there with his wife Tzipora and he's not going to leave without her permission. Hare'elu kinuyin l'shvua. These are nicknames that are used for a shvua. Okay, this in the Mefarshim they speak about why it says over here regarding neider b'mayi. Why doesn't it say a shvua b'mayi? It seemingly, some change it. Mayi refers to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a nickname for Moshe Rabbeinu. But we're talking here about the substitutes for the language that's used for shvua, and nevertheless the Mishnah uses the term neider. Okay. So here the Gemara brings the machlokes, which was quoted b'kitzer in the beginning of the Masechta. What's the source of this concept? What is this idea? Substitutes for Nedarim, of these strange languages. Where do they come from? So Itma we learned the machlokes about this. Kinuyen, these substitutes, Rabbi Yechanan, Omar, Lashanu Misain. These are various different languages of different nations. That's what they are. Rab Shimon ben Lakish Omar, Lashan Shabadu Lahem Chachamim, Lias Neidebay. These are languages or expressions that the Chachamim created for a person to use instead of using the word carbon. Chachamim created these languages. And what's this term badu? Like we see the expression, it says in the pasuk, in the month that the person invented from his heart. The word badu, Chachamim invented these expressions. Okay, before I go weiter, just to explain Rabbi Yechanan's opinion, if these kinuyim are just different languages, so then why is the Mishnah even referring to them as kinuyim? Why doesn't the Mishnah just simply say, according to his opinion, that if you make a neder b'chalosh and you use a neder in any language, the neder takes effect? Why is the Mishnah giving these unique, strange words for the kinuyim? You could just say generally, you can make a neder in any language. It doesn't have to be in Lashon HaKodesh. You have like a similar Mishnah in Brachas, where the Mishnah in Brachas talking, you can say Kriya Shema and different things. It doesn't have to be dafka in Lashon HaKodesh. So the Mefarshim explained, even according to Rabbi Yechanan, that says that it's various different languages, but nevertheless, even in those languages, it's not the proper pronunciation or the proper words in those languages. It's even in those languages, gufe, it's words that are not pronounced properly, and therefore he's saying it's various words that are taken from other languages, and even though they're not being said accurately, nevertheless they will be a neder. So even according to his opinion, it's not kipshute mamish, direct words from languages. Okay, but now the Gemara explains Rish Lakish's opinion. What's this idea? Why did Chachamim invent these new terminologies, and why not just use the original term of a carbon, that this object should be also to be like a carbon? So the Gemara explains, according to Rish Lakish, why did Chachamim make these substitutes, these languages? Carbon. They don't want a person to use the term carbon. Why not? Carbon. Let a person use the term carbon when he makes a neder. And says the Gemara, Dilma Amar carbon Lashem. So when he makes his neder, he might say this object should be a carbon Lashem. Frek the Gemara, what's the issue? Carbon Lashem. What happens if he's going to say carbon Lashem? And says the Gemara, Dilma Amar Lashem v'loy Amar carbon. Once he's using the term carbon Lashem, he might end up using the term Lashem without the word carbon, and then then he's saying Hashem's name in vain. Because if you say this object should be Lashem, that's not a term of a neder b'chlal. The neder doesn't take effect, and then he ended up saying Hashem's name in vain. So because this comes from a pasuk, because in the pasuk it says carbon Lashem, so when a person says this object should be like a carbon, he's going to say like the lashon of the pasuk, carbon Lashem, and he may skip the word carbon. He's going to say just the word Lashem. So this is just in order for a person not to come to say Hashem's name in vain, as we learned the sugi in the Gemara before, how careful we have to be with not chas v'shalom mentioning Hashem's name in vain. The Tanya, and we learned in the Braisa regarding saying Hashem's name in vain, and specifically in connection to what it says over here, Carbon Lashem, that Rab Shimon said, Minayim, from where do I know, Shelo Yomer Adam Lashem Oila. When a person is making a neder that something should become a carbon, so a person should not say Lashem Oila, or Lashem Mincha, Lashem Taida, Lashem Shlomim. So he shouldn't say the Eibish's name first, and then the carbon that he wants to dedicate. But he should say it the other way around. He should say Oila Lashem and so on. Talmud Laima, we see it from the pasuk itself. It says carbon Lashem, even though it would have been appropriate to say Lashem carbon, the Eibish's name first. But the Torah says carbon Lashem. The Kal V'chaimer. So we learn from this a Kal V'chaimer. Umazeh shalei niskaven el lahaske shem shemayim ala carbon. Amra Torah carbon lashem, if when a person is bringing a carbon. So the Torah uses the term carbon lashem. So levatala alachas kama v'kama. Most definitely, if a person is not trying to be makdash a carbon, he's just saying a neder over here. We have to be concerned that he can say Hashem's name in vain. So therefore, Chachamim instituted these different substitutes that he shouldn't say the term carbon. Sagt the Gemara, leime ketanoi. Shall we say that the machlokes of Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, whether these substitutes, these kinuyim, are from various languages, or they are l'shainis that Chachamim invented, is the machlokes of the following Tanoim, of Beishamai and Beisilel. Because Beishamai Yoimre and Beishamai say, kinuyin asurin. If you use the substitutes of substitutes, which the Gemara soon will bring examples, what that means, other languages that are sort of offsprings of these, so then it's also going to be asur. The neder takes effect. Kinuyin mutarin. If you're using substitutes of substitutes, then that it doesn't go so far. The neder that you say will not take effect. So what's the basis of their machlokes? My love, don't you think? Man, dama kinuyin. The Beishamai that's machmer and says even the kinuyim of the kinuyim take effect. Kasavar, he says kinuyin lashon is saying that the Kinuyin, these are languages of various different nations. So therefore, just like the Kinuyim itself is the Lashon of Umais, so to the Kinuyim, other Kinuyim are also a certain variation, a certain dialect of the Lashonis of Goyim, and therefore it takes effect. And Beisilel that says that the Kinuyim of the Kinuyim are mutter, Kesavar Lashon Shabadalem Chachamim. So he held that it's a lashon that Chachamim invented. So therefore it has to be precisely like this expression Chachamim invented. You can't invent your own, you can't substitute it with something else, and therefore the kinuyim of the kinuyim will not take effect. Says the Gemara, not necessarily is this the basis of the machlokes of Beishamai and Beisilel. We can say the kul alme kinuyim lashon u'mesein. Both of them could hold like Rabbi Yochanan that the kinuyim come from the languages of Goyim. And what's their machlokes? Beishamai savri bahani nami mishtayumis. Beishamai say that when you use these substitutes of the substitutes, so these are certain various dialects that Goyim also speak it, even though it's not the proper language. But sometimes people speak in these languages, especially in those times, they didn't have these textbooks where the languages were so firm in what they were. So people speak in all kinds of variations in these languages. So even substitutes of substitutes could also be included in these languages of Goyim. But Beisilel say, Bahani lo mishtayumais. Most of these nations, they don't use these variations of these languages, and therefore it's not clear enough, and the neder will not take effect. Or another pshat, we could say, what's the basis of their machlokes? And according to some Mefarshim, this Ibai Seimeh is actually saying that even if we're going to say that everybody holds like Rish Lakish, that it's Chachamim were the ones that instituted these expressions. But most Mefarshim say that even this Ibai Seimeh goes according to Rabbi Yochanan. Ibai Seimeh, another opinion we could say, Beishamai, we have a lot of simcha today, a lot of... Sagt the Gemara, Beishamai Savri, Beishamai hold, Gazrinen kinuyin mishum kinuyin. Chachamim were geyser to aser the substitutes of the substitutes because of the kinuyin itself. That because the original language that is the neder is the kinuyin, but Chachamim were geyser that even the kinuyim of the kinuyim should be aser as well, even though it's taken not the languages that Goyim speak in, or this is not the language that Chachamim instituted, they should say. But Chachamim were geyser that the neder should take effect then as well. Beisilel savri loy gazrinin kinuyim, we're not geyser the kinuyim for the kinuyim mishum kinuyim, and therefore it does not take effect. But here, just don't make a mistake, the Gemara here does not mean to say that what Beis Shammai is saying is when a person makes a neder and uses this kinuyim, that the neder only takes effect with the Rabbanon. That's what it sounds like from the words of the Gemara, that it's some kind of a gzeira, and therefore the neder will only be with the Rabbanon. The Chachamim were geyser and said that those languages should be included in the neder, and therefore when you make a neder using them, once Chachamim were geyser this, they become accepted languages for a neder, and the neder will take effect even minat. Now the Gemara brings a bunch of examples here, a bunch of interesting words. What are these kinuyim? What are these substitutes of substitutes for the neder? Hey chidami kinuyim the Nedarim. So for Nedarim, what are these various languages? Tani Rav Yosef, mekan mana, or however you pronounce this, or mekan chana, mekan sana. Hey chidami kinuyim the cherem. What are those secondary substitutes for cherem? So Tani, we learned mafsha, or charakim. So again, Tani mafsha. This goes together in just a second. Mafshah, Charakim, these are all the Mafshah is a name of a Chacham. That's what it is. Okay? So Mafshah is not one of the expressions, but it's a name. Charakim, Charachim, and Charafim. What are Kinuye in the Nazirus? What are the secondary substitutes of Nazirus? Tani Rav Yosef, Machazkana, Manzachana, and Mafichana. Or Ibayalu. Now the question was asked regarding this expression, Mifchazana Mai. Is that going to be considered to be also a secondary substitute for a Nazir? Mischazana Mai. Misazana Mai. Are they included also in these secondary substitutes? Amalei Ravina Ravashi. Kinma Mai. How about the expression of kinma? What does that mean? Do I say kainam ka'amar? Is that a substitute for the term kainam, which we know kainam is a substitute for carbon, so it's a secondary substitute. Aidilme, or maybe no, kinman beisam ka'amar. Kinma is just the term that's related to besamim, spices, so it has nothing to do with the nether. Another question. Kina. Person uses the term kina. Mai. What does that mean? Kina shel tanagaylan ka'amar? Does that mean just like a nest or a place for roosters? Or kina is an expression that's related to kainam, a nether. Tibayi, and also the Gemara says there are questions regarding kinuye in the shvuah. Regarding the secondary expressions that are used for shvuah, we also have the following questions. What's going to be the halacha of shvuel, shvusiel, shkukoel? What's the halacha with these? Are they accepted as secondary expressions used for shvuah? So the Gemara says, shvuel, the term shvuel, that shouldn't be a question, because this is actually a name. Shvuel ben Gershom. It's a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. His name was Shvuel ben Gershom. So shvuel is just a name. So that's for sure not a secondary expression used for a shvuah. Mashma, that's what it means. Ella, the Gemara says, the question is shvuvael, shvusiel, shkukoel. That's the question. Mahu. So all these various expressions, the Gemara does not resolve whether they are part of the nether or part of a shvuah or not. Shmuel said, Ashivsa lo yama klum. So if he said, Oma Ashivsa, he says, Ashivsa, that's nothing. Ashkika lo yama klum. Krinsha lo yama klum. These expressions are definitely not secondary expressions used for a shvuah. Okay, the Gemara finishes off with the last point that it said in the Mishnah, Nadar b'mayi are ele kinuyin. A person that says that he makes a neder with mayi, which means Moshe Rabbeinu, so then that's a kinui for a shvuah. So Tanya, Rab Shimon Gamliel Omer, ha'ime b'mayi. If a person just says b'mayi, which is a nickname from Moshe Rabbeinu, lo yama klum. He has to say b'maymasa, the amma mayi. Maymasa is a nickname for shvuah. My masad am shvuah means that I'm making a shvuah like the shvuah of Moshe Rabbeinu that he said in the Torah. Then arei lekinuyin l'shvuah. That's a kinui for the shvuah. That's what the Mishnah meant. Not dar b'mayi. It's not enough just to say mayi. He has to say a shvuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. My masad am mayi. That's the shvuah. That's the nickname of a shvuah.